When you think of survival, you probably picture the wilderness, tents, campfires, and raw landscapes. But survival isn't always about escaping to the woods. For millions during the Great Depression, survival meant staying alive in the middle of cities stripped bare of opportunity. No wilderness to hunt in, no steady income, and often no access to the basics we now take for granted: soap, heating fuel, or even clean water. Yet those men and women didn't vanish under pressure. They adapted, engineered, and endured. And among their many forgotten strategies, one stood out so strongly that it deserves a place in every modern urban survival kit: the Depression-era waste loop system, a complete method for turning scraps, trash and byproducts into resources for fuel, cleaning and cooking. It wasn't just thrift. It was a structured, practical system that turned poverty into resilience. And today, when city life feels fragile, that same method solves many of the urban survival problems we still face. Let's unpack what it was, how it worked, and how you can apply it today. Because, you know, history's toughest survivors already solved problems that modern preppers are just rediscovering. They created a closed-loop survival system that made nothing go to waste. During the Great Depression, the poorest neighborhoods, especially in industrial cities like Chicago, Detroit and Pittsburgh, operated almost like small ecosystems. Every household became its own recycling plant. Food scraps, ash, grease and fabric all had second lives. When money disappeared, people didn't stop cleaning or cooking. They changed how they did it. Take grease, for example. Most families collected leftover fat from cooking, bacon drippings, meat grease, even oil from canned goods, and stored it in a tin under the stove. That grease became soap, lamp fuel, and waterproofing agent. It sounds crude, but the chemistry was simple and effective. Fat mixed with lye from wood ash or baking soda creates soap. You know, a wick dipped in that same grease can burn like a candle for hours. It was self-sufficiency at its most precise. To recreate this today, just save cooking fat instead of tossing it out. Strain it through cloth to remove food bits, store it in a jar, and, well, you've got emergency lamp oil, fire starter material, or even lubricant for squeaky hinges and tools. It's honestly one of the simplest ways to start building your own Depression-era resource loop. They solved heating and cooking problems with makeshift fuel systems. Urban survival during the 1930s often came down to one thing: keeping warm and cooking with almost no money. Coal was expensive, wood was scarce, and many tenements had limited heat. People responded with a kind of ingenuity that modern off-grid enthusiasts would respect. They built small, efficient stoves out of tin cans, bricks, and salvaged metal pipes. The most famous of these was the hobo stove, a compact burner made from a large coffee can with air holes punched around the base. But here's where the Depression-era hack really shines. They didn't rely on traditional wood. They burned everything that could produce sustained heat: dry corn cobs, cardboard, old newspapers, and even animal bones. When those materials were soaked in old cooking grease or paraffin wax, they turned into long-burning fuel cakes. You can replicate this by soaking strips of cardboard in melted wax or fat, stacking them inside a small metal container and lighting from the base. The result is a slow, even burn perfect for boiling water or, heating a room in an emergency. This principle, fuel efficiency through repurposing, still outperforms many modern options because it requires no electricity, batteries or specialized equipment. It's urban resilience born from necessity. They turned trash into tools through a culture of salvage and repair. The Great Depression gave rise to what was often called the mender's mindset. Broken shoes weren't thrown away. They were resold using old tires or layered leather scraps. Tin cans became scoops, funnels, or cooking pots. Even rags were braided into mats or used to patch clothes. This wasn't just desperation. It was methodical craftsmanship that created stability when the supply chain failed. Today, applying this same mindset is as relevant as ever. Urban survival means, assuming that access to stores, online deliveries and utilities could fail. If you can repair rather than replace, you're already halfway to independence. Learn how to, repurpose metal cans into functional tools, sew tiers in clothing, and maintain gear using basic materials. A Depression-era home had a sewing kit, a sharpening stone and wire, 3 tools that honestly could fix nearly anything. One modern adaptation is to maintain a salvage box. Keep useful waste like jars, twine, broken electronics, and small containers organized. In a crisis, these items can be reconfigured into traps, filters, or cooking implements. That was the foundation of Depression-era ingenuity. A belief that materials never lose value, only form. They solved sanitation problems with homemade cleaning systems. In many cities during the Depression, soap and cleaning supplies became luxuries. People didn't stop maintaining hygiene. They found chemical substitutes using ash, vinegar, and lime. Ash mixed with water creates a mild alkaline solution, lye water, which was used for laundry, scrubbing, and even disinfecting floors. Vinegar, often fermented from spoiled fruit or diluted with rainwater, it served as an antiseptic cleaner and food preservative. Quite versatile, wouldn't you say? For modern application, you can mix 2 tablespoons of wood ash with a quart of boiling water. Let it settle and then pour off the clear liquid. This can clean greasy pans or sanitize surfaces without the need for commercial soap. It's safe, renewable, and costs nothing at all. The Depression taught people to separate cleaning into chemistry, not consumerism. And that principle still works when supply lines fail. They created community-based survival networks that, really multiplied resilience. One of the least discussed but most powerful Depression-era hacks wasn't mechanical, it was social. People formed swap networks and neighbourhood cooperatives. One family might have access to flour, another might have a spare tool or a skill. Barter replaced money and, well, survival turned communal. This wasn't charity, it was a survival economy. In modern urban settings, this lesson translates into building micro-resilience networks. You know, it's about knowing your neighbours, trading skills, and sharing tools. If one person has a generator, another can contribute food or repairs. The Depression taught that independence doesn't mean isolation. It means shared stability. You know, the forgotten lesson of the Great Depression is that resourcefulness is the real currency. What the Depression proved beyond doubt is that, well, resilience isn't about stockpiling. It's about adapting. Those who survived weren't the richest or the strongest. Honestly, they were the most flexible thinkers. They observed, experimented, and turned scarcity into systems. Today, when cities depend so heavily on fragile supply chains and digital infrastructure, their lessons become more relevant than ever. A jar of saved greaser can turned into a stove, a community built on barter. These aren't relics. They're practical survival strategies that still solve real urban problems, from power outages to supply shortages. Every one of them was born out of necessity, tested by hardship and refined by experience. So, the next time you hear the hum of the city and think survival is a rural art, remember the ingenuity of Depression-era survivors who built warmth, sanitation and dignity from almost nothing. If this deep dive into Depression-era survival wisdom gave you new insight into how our ancestors truly endured, make sure to subscribe to Echoes of Valor, share this episode with fellow history enthusiasts, and keep learning from the people who turned scarcity into strength. Because the past isn't just history, it's a manual for surviving the next storm.